I want you to take a moment wherever you are and think about the challenges you're facing right now. Maybe it's a dream that feels too big, a problem that seems too heavy, or a situation where the road ahead just doesn't look clear. But I'm here to remind you today, God is already handling it. Yes, He's working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it, even when you don't feel it. You may be worried, discouraged, or even uncertain about the future, but remember, God's got a plan for your life and is never caught off guard. His timing is perfect. His love is unshakable, and His power is limitless. So take a deep breath. Let go of that stress. Trust that the one who created the universe is already working on your behalf. You are not alone. You are not fighting this battle in your own strength. God is already handling it. Trusting in God's timing can be one of the most challenging yet profoundly transformative aspects of faith. Life is full of moments where we feel as though things should move faster, that we should have answers now, or that our dreams and desires should have already materialized. We often find ourselves in situations where we ask, why is this happening now? Or why hasn't this happened yet? But trusting in God's timing means understanding that there is a divine rhythm to everything in life, one that doesn't always align with our immediate expectations or plans. At the core of trusting God's timing is recognizing that His perspective is far broader than our own. We are limited by our human understanding, but God sees the entire picture. He knows what we need and when we need it, even when we can't see the bigger purpose. Think of the way we approach waiting. Often we see waiting as a frustrating experience, a time of inactivity or lack of progress. However, from God's viewpoint, waiting is a crucial part of the process. It's in those moments of waiting that He refines us, builds our character, and strengthens our faith. The times when we feel like nothing is happening are often the moments when God is working most powerfully behind the scenes, aligning everything according to His will. We live in a world of instant gratification where everything is just a click away. This fast-paced lifestyle shapes how we approach our prayers, desires, and even our sense of purpose. We want things to happen quickly, but God doesn't work on our timeline. His plans are far more intricate and deliberate. Just because something hasn't materialized in your life yet doesn't mean it won't. It simply means that the time isn't right, or that God is preparing you for something even greater than what you initially envisioned. Remember, God's promises are never delayed, but rather they are perfectly timed according to His will. One of the key aspects of trusting in God's timing is understanding that His delays are not denials. Often when we are in the midst of waiting, we may feel discouraged, as though the very thing we've been praying for is being withheld from us. Yet God's delay is not a rejection. It's an opportunity for growth. The Bible teaches us that God has a plan for our lives, a plan that is full of hope and prosperity. But we must be patient as He unfolds it in His perfect timing. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 8:28 that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. This verse reminds us that even when we can't understand why things are happening the way they are, God is still working everything for our good. Trusting in God's timing also requires surrender. We need to surrender our need for control and allow God to lead us. Too often we try to force outcomes, manipulate situations, or push doors open that aren't meant to be opened yet. This is when frustration sets in and we begin to feel lost, anxious, or defeated. However, when we release our grip on the outcome and trust that God has it all in hand, we open ourselves to the peace that surpasses all understanding. In Philippians 4:6-7, we're encouraged to not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. When we stop striving to make things happen and instead trust in God's process, we are rewarded with His peace. There is also the reality that God's timing is often tied to our preparation. Sometimes we might feel as though we're ready for something, but in God's wisdom, we aren't quite there yet. He is not only working in the circumstances around us, but He is also working within us, preparing us to handle the blessings and responsibilities that will come. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, we too must grow in character, patience, wisdom, and faith before we can step into the fullness of what God has in store. If we rushed into certain blessings or opportunities before we were prepared, we might not be able to handle them or fully appreciate them. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph had dreams of greatness, but before he could fulfill his destiny, he went through years of trials, including being sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. At each stage, Joseph might have questioned why things weren't happening as he had envisioned, but God was using each moment to mold him into the leader he would one day become. His timing wasn't delayed, it was just perfectly set according to God's plan. Joseph's life shows us that what seems like a detour or delay is often part of a divine preparation process that leads to something greater than we could have imagined. Another aspect of trusting in God's timing is understanding that He is never early, but He is never late either. While we may feel as though God is taking too long or dragging His feet, the truth is that He is always right on time. There's a famous saying, God's never early, but He's always on time. It's a reminder that the moments when we think we're running out of time or the clock is ticking down, God is already there, orchestrating the perfect moment for His will to unfold. In the story of Lazarus in the Gospel of John, Jesus intentionally delayed His visit when He heard that His friend was sick, and as a result, Lazarus died. However, when Jesus arrived, He performed a miracle by raising Lazarus from the dead. This wasn't a delay in the sense that Jesus had failed to act. Rather, it was to display God's glory and teach those around Him that God's timing is always precise. Trusting in God's timing also invites us to surrender our expectations and allow God to exceed them. Often we limit what we think is possible based on what we can see or what we can imagine. We get focused on the outcome and forget that God can do far more than we could ever ask or think. When we trust in His timing, we release our own limitations and allow God to move in ways we might never have anticipated. His blessings and opportunities can exceed what we thought was even possible, but we need to be patient and trust that He knows what. As you wait, remember that trusting in God's timing doesn't mean sitting idly by without action. It means staying faithful, continuing to seek God's will, and doing what you can while you wait. There is a difference between passive waiting and active faith. In the meantime, God may be calling you to grow in certain areas, serve others, or prepare for what's ahead. Trusting in God's timing is not about passivity. It's about doing your part even when the results seem distant, knowing that God is faithful to fulfill His promises at the right time. It is a challenge to trust in God's timing, especially when things aren't going the way we envisioned. But as we grow in faith, we learn that His timing is perfect. God sees the bigger picture, He knows what we need, and He is always working on our behalf. Trusting His timing means acknowledging that He has a plan that is far greater than what we can see or understand. And in this trust, we find peace, assurance, and the confidence that everything will fall into place according to His perfect will. Letting go of control can feel like one of the hardest things to do, especially in a world that constantly teaches us to take charge, make things happen, and be in control of every aspect of our lives. From managing our careers and relationships to planning every detail of our future, we often believe that if we just hold tightly to our plans, we can shape our destiny. However, the truth is that when we let go of control, we open the door for God to step in and take over in ways we could never have imagined. One of the fundamental challenges we face in life is the illusion of control. We try to micromanage every situation, manipulate outcomes, and dictate the path ahead. Yet no matter how hard we try, we can't control everything. There will always be things beyond our ability to influence, whether it's the actions of others, the timing of events, or circumstances that are out of our hands. This is where faith comes into play. Letting go of control is not about being passive or irresponsible. It's about recognizing that there is a higher power at work and trusting that God has a plan for our lives far greater than anything we could orchestrate on our own. In order to let go of control, we must first confront our fear. Fear often lies at the heart of our need for control. We fear what will happen if we don't make the decisions, if we don't have our hands in every situation, or if we don't have a firm grip on every outcome. We fear the unknown, the uncertainty of the future, and the possibility of failure. But God calls us to step out in faith, to surrender our anxieties, and trust that He is in control. When we allow fear to dictate our actions, we prevent ourselves from experiencing the peace that comes with relinquishing control to God. The Bible tells us that perfect love casts out fear, 1 John 4:18. When we trust in God's perfect love and plan for us, the fear that drives our desire for control begins to dissipate. Letting go of control also involves acknowledging our limitations. As human beings, we are limited by our knowledge, experience, and understanding. We only see part of the picture, and often our plans are based on what we think is best in the moment. But God sees the full picture. He knows what we need before we even ask, and He knows the timing and path that will lead to the best outcome for our lives. By relinquishing control, we allow God to work in ways that we couldn't even imagine. Our plans may seem logical, but God's plans are far superior. Trusting in Him means recognizing that He has the wisdom to lead us in a way that aligns with His will, even when we don't understand it. Letting go of control also involves surrendering our need for immediate results. We live in a society that is obsessed with instant gratification. We want answers now, results now, and success now. But God often works in ways that take time. Growth takes time. Healing takes time. Restoration takes time. When we let go of our need to rush the process, we allow God to work in us and through us at His pace. We might not see the results immediately, but that doesn't mean God isn't at work. He is planting seeds that will grow in His perfect timing. Our job is to remain faithful, keep moving forward, and trust that God will bring about the fruit in due season. When we let go of control, we also learn to embrace the present moment. Often our need for control stems from our anxiety about the future. We become so focused on what might happen next that we forget to live fully in the now. By letting go of control, we can be present where we are and appreciate the journey that God has us on. Instead of constantly worrying about the next step, we can rest in the assurance that God is already there, preparing the way. Jesus reminds us in Matthew 6:34 not to worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. When we release our need to control the future, we free ourselves to embrace the beauty of the present moment, trusting that God has the future covered. Letting go of control also means learning to trust in God's timing. We often want things to happen on our terms and according to our schedule. We want a job promotion, a relationship, or a breakthrough to happen right now because we believe it's the right time. But God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own. In our impatience, we may try to force things to happen or take matters into our own hands, but that only leads to frustration. When we trust in God's timing, we acknowledge that He knows what is best for us and that His timing is always for our ultimate good. It may not always make sense in the moment, but when we look back, we often see how God's timing was exactly what we needed. Another aspect of letting go of control is releasing the need to make everything perfect. Perfectionism often goes hand in hand with control. We feel the need to perfect every detail, every conversation, and every task, fearing that anything less than perfection will lead to failure or rejection. But God doesn't require perfection from us. He requires faithfulness. When we let go of the pressure to be perfect, we allow ourselves the freedom to live authentically and to trust that God is working through us even in our imperfections. His strength is made perfect in our weakness, 2 Corinthians 12:9. We don't have to have it all together for God to use us. In fact, our weaknesses are often the very places where His power shines the brightest. Letting go of control also means surrendering our will to God's will. The Bible teaches us to seek God's kingdom first and trust that all other things will be added to us, Matthew 6:33. When we surrender our will, we place our desires in God's hands, trusting that His desires for us are greater than anything we could want for ourselves. Surrender doesn't mean giving up on our dreams or passions. It means trusting that God has a plan for our lives that will bring us fulfillment in ways we cannot yet see. When we let go of control, we say, God, I trust that you know what's best for me, and I am willing to follow your lead. Letting go of control is an act of faith, and it requires us to release our fears, our anxieties, and our desire for certainty. It means acknowledging that we can't do it all on our own and that we need God's help, guidance, and grace. By surrendering control, we create space for God to move in our lives in a way that surpasses our expectations. Letting go of control isn't easy, but it is the key to experiencing God's peace, provision, and purpose in a deeper, more meaningful way. Trusting Him with our lives means letting go of the illusion that we can handle everything on our own and acknowledging that He is the one who holds everything in His hand. Faith over fear is one of the most powerful principles in the Christian life, yet it is often one of the hardest to fully grasp and live out. Fear is an inherent part of being human. It's natural to feel afraid when faced with the unknown, when confronted with challenges that seem too big to overcome, or when we face situations beyond our control. Fear has a way of creeping in, making us question ourselves, our abilities, and even the promises of God. But the Bible constantly encourages us to choose faith over fear, to trust in God's goodness and power even when the future looks uncertain. The truth is, faith has the power to silence fear and propel us forward even in the midst of adversity. One of the reasons why fear is so powerful is because it often magnifies the size of the problem and makes us feel as though we are powerless. It causes us to focus on the worst case scenario and to imagine every possible negative outcome. But fear is also a liar. It tells us we are not capable, that we are too weak, or that we don't deserve God's blessings. It makes us believe that we are alone, that no one understands, and that we are destined for failure. However, faith works in the opposite direction. Faith focuses on the truth of who God is, not the size of our problems. Faith reminds us that God is with us, that He is for us, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. Faith by its nature requires trust. When we have faith, we trust that God knows what He is doing, even when we don't understand His ways. Faith allows us to look beyond our immediate circumstances and see the bigger picture that God is orchestrating. It doesn't mean that we won't have doubts or moments of weakness, but it does mean that in those moments, we choose to hold on to the truth of God's promises. We choose to believe that He is bigger than our fear and that His power is greater than anything that threatens to hold us back. Faith overcomes fear because it is grounded in the belief that God is in control, even when everything seems out of our hands. One of the most important things to remember about faith is that it is not a feeling. Feelings come and go, and fear often makes us feel paralyzed or overwhelmed. Faith, however, is a decision, a choice to believe in God's goodness even when the circumstances say otherwise. In 2 Corinthians 5:7, we are told to walk by faith, not by sight. This means that faith is not based on what we can see or understand with our natural eyes. It is based on the belief that God is working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see the full picture. Fear often tells us that we should rely on what we can see, that we should trust our own abilities or our own understanding of the situation. But faith calls us to look beyond what is visible and trust in God's unseen hand at work in our lives. In moments of fear, we are also reminded that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. This verse is a powerful declaration that fear is not from God. It is a tool that the enemy uses to try to keep us from stepping into the fullness of what God has for us. Fear keeps us stagnant. It prevents us from taking risks. And it stops us from pursuing the dreams and purposes that God has placed in our hearts. But faith, on the other hand, frees us. It propels us forward, gives us courage to face the unknown, and assures us that we can overcome any obstacle because God is with us. The spirit of power that God has given us enables us to stand firm even when fear tries to make us falter. The spirit of love reminds us that God is for us, and that His love is greater than any fear that comes our way. And the spirit of a sound mind gives us clarity and wisdom to navigate through life's challenges with confidence. There are many examples in the Bible of individuals who chose faith over fear, and their stories serve as a powerful reminder of what is possible when we place our trust in God. One of the most well-known stories is that of David and Goliath. David was just a young shepherd boy, but when he faced the giant Goliath, he didn't see the size of the problem. He saw the size of his God. While everyone else was paralyzed by fear, David stood firm in his faith that God would deliver him. He said to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." 1 Samuel 17:45. David's faith in God's ability to deliver him gave him the courage to face what seemed like an impossible situation. And we know how the story ends. David defeated Goliath with a single stone, proving that faith over fear can bring victory in the most unlikely circumstances. Another example is the story of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. When they found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, fear began to take hold of them. But Moses, a man of faith, encouraged them to trust in God. He told them, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Exodus 14:13. As the Israelites followed Moses' lead and put their faith in God, He parted the Red Sea and led them to safety. The fear that had threatened to overtake them was replaced by faith, and the result was a miraculous. In our own lives, fear can often feel like a giant looming over us, making us feel insignificant or unworthy. We may face financial struggles, relationship challenges, health issues, or fears about the future. These fears can be overwhelming, and they can make us question whether we have what it takes to overcome them. But just as with David and the Israelites, we can choose to face our fears with faith. Faith tells us that no matter what we are facing, God is bigger. Faith tells us that we don't have to fight our battles alone. God is right there with us, strengthening us and guiding us through every step. The Bible tells us that nothing is impossible with God. Luke 1:37. When we face fear with faith, we align ourselves with the truth that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and always present. Our faith in His ability to overcome every challenge brings us the strength to move forward, even when fear tries to hold us back. It gives us the courage to take steps of faith even when we don't know exactly what lies ahead. Faith assures us that no matter the outcome, God will be with us and He will work everything together for our good. It's important to remember that choosing faith over fear is not a one-time decision, it's a daily choice. Every time fear rises up in our hearts, we have the opportunity to choose faith. It's in the small, everyday moments that our faith is strengthened and grows. When we consistently choose to believe God's promises over the lies of fear, we build a foundation of trust that allows us to face even greater challenges with confidence. Faith over fear isn't about being fearless. It's about trusting God's presence and power even in the midst of fear. It's about acknowledging that with God on our side, we can face anything.